Hi guys. Got something? Okay. So I want to just tell you what I did while we were breaking is I went ahead and drilled the holes. This is the front. So my mounting holes, I always countersink, and whenever I'm selling something, I always try and provide the mounting hardware as well. And a lot of times I want to take any sort of factory whatever off of it and make it black, varnish it so that it matches up nice. And then countersink the back side so that when we assemble it with the flowers and the rivets, that I can actually fill I hope those fit. I can make it fit with a hammer. And then it'll fill some of that. Ideally, I want that to be flush, but I grabbed whatever rivets I had at home and they might be too long. So if I have that countersunk and I fill that countersink, I can always go back with my grinder and grind it flush, and I still have a solid rivet head to hold it all together. So I'm just going to smash out the nails, the big barn spikes that I brought. I said smash. Oh, geez, thank you so much. So what I do with this is I keep my tongs in line with my work, and then in front of me, try and work, in front of me. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 20. So I've got some sort of a surface now that I can put a center dot. Oops. And I run over to my treadle now that I have and smash that. I guess there's one here somewhere, but. And then again, leave it on the floor to cool, drill it. And then I always clean all of my pieces. I took over, my favorite thing is that wire knot that's on that Makita or Milwaukee, whatever's over there. But that's it'll tear up your guts if you get stuck in your shirt. And I know from experience, a couple times I've done it.
Hold on 1 second.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. And to me, obviously we can all look at this, and this looks cruddy, and how nice and pretty this is. And I clean all of my pieces individually before assembly, because after you assemble it, you can't get into some of the spots, and it just drives me nuts. I'm sort of a fanatic for the finish. I'll go ahead and, you want me to smash the next one? Thank you, sir. I don't think I need to go to 20. It seems about the same size, and I don't know if you can tell, but there's a shiny spot on the anvil there, and I use that shiny spot as my drawing from the last one and try and come to the same size. Did you see I just flipped my hammer over? And I got this one cockeyed. See how it's leaning this way? I don't care, because when you twist round to straighten it back up, it's still round. So no problem with that. Just about top tools, or to me, whenever I'm striking something, a handheld tool or whatnot, I always use the round surface of my hammer. And my belief in that is, and it's come through being taught through the farrier stuff, is that regardless of what angle I come in at, I have a rounded surface. The top of all my tools should be rounded as well. So when I have two rounded surfaces coming together, the force is concentrated to that one spot. Whereas if I come in at an angle, a bad swing with a flat surface, I get a ricocheting blow, and it doesn't make the impact that I want it to make. So I'm always round to round when I'm hitting a top tool. Thank you. know, 22. Were you guys counting? Or just me? Ah. If only I could swing with my left hand like Seth does. What would happen if I tried it? Oh, I shouldn't do anything in front of people. I can't do it, right? I'm sorry? Oh. Okay, so I'm just going to leave those set aside, and then because they're rusty old barn nails, they need to go to the little wire wheel. Maybe I can recruit somebody to clean those up for me and drill the holes, and then we'll finish assembling that. So while that's happening, I showed you a couple of different variations of how to do the flower, and then at one point, did I give you this? Yeah. I've got this one piece that I wasn't paying good attention, and it's not very square. It's more of a rectangle shape, and you can use it to make a flower, but I try and make sure I'm being consistent and try to be perceived precision, whatever, so that my outcome is as close to similar as possible, and there's no way they're ever going to be. They're all going to be slightly variations of each other. But if I start with the very first piece already being out of tolerance, then by the time I'm done, it looks like crap. So what do you do with that one? Well, I thought it's kind of a butterfly, and so I took advantage of it being that way, and I'll turn it into a butterfly. And how do I do that? So same process, just a couple of different tools. And I have one of these. My father got it for me. My father is not a blacksmith nor a farrier. He's a sheet metal worker. But there's people who like to do file work, and there's people who like sculpture, and there's people who like architectural, whatever. There's people who like to build tools, and there are guys who like to collect tools. And thank God my father is one of those. So he buys me a lot of tools because he likes to just collect stuff. And so the way this is, if you haven't seen these, it's a pretty simple little machine. It's a little miniature power hammer, sort of. And the edge is a butcher blade. The two sides, sharp sides, go together. And when I put the material in there, I'm going to get material moving away in one direction and a sharp shoulder on the other direction. Same way as you would build a tenon for a tool or a table leg or a flower stem or whatever. So we'll heat up this one, and I'll just knock out a butterfly fairly quick. And the same thing, what's a butterfly look like? There's a lot of different varieties of butterflies, so just like flowers, you can't hardly screw them up. But I look at the lines. To me, the horseshoeing as well as the blacksmithing is all about lines. And that's why I like to watch somebody pencil draw, is I get to see the lines that they're creating to create that. And then I want to just create lines with my tools and my hammer, or the lines of the way you bend the steel. And so examining lines on a butterfly, I kind of got the idea they went in these directions. So we'll go ahead and just knock that a little bit. I think I'll go this way where I can see it. That won't hold them. So the other thing about tongs, like you guys are familiar that we've got all these different varieties of tongs for holding different stuff. And for farriers, we basically have 4 pairs of tongs: quarter, 5/16, 3/8, and 1/2 inch, and that's what we use. And for whatever material you're holding, if you don't have a solid grip on your material, you can't hit it efficiently and make the material move. It moves within your tongs instead of underneath your hammer. And I was never introduced to a gap gauge until Clay showed me one, and I thought it was the coolest thing that you got this little thing you just hold up there and it shows you how thick your material is, and how cool is that? But for farriers, this is a gap gauge. If I want to know if a piece of steel is 3/8, if I grab it with I have a piece of 3/8 here somewhere. Right here. So if I grab this and I have contact on both sides of the jaws all the way, I've got pretty good grip in there, and I can whack that in a lot of different ways with it being solid. If I have the wrong size tongs, it only grabs in one spot, and I can't hardly hold it still. And so, obviously, this is not 1/4-inch steel because these are 1/4-inch tongs. And when I see somebody leave a pair of tongs in the fire, my heart is crushing inside because it's tong abuse to me. and I can't build tongs. I can't build tongs well. And so I don't want to even do maintenance on these, let alone build them, so I certainly don't want to destroy them. So I'm very protective of my tongs. And let's see, where did my scrolling tongs go? These are my favorite pair of tongs, and that they came from the man that got the wine glasses. This was what I got in the trade, and it is the sexiest pair, that S-curve that women have. And I mean, it's just so ergonomically correct, and it's really comfortable, and I love those tongs. So feel them, but please do not abuse them.
Do you know why carrier style tongs, why it has like a dished out section in the center?
In here?
Yeah.
If I built tongs, I could certainly explain to you exactly why they do that.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
If you had just flat surface, you can't grip it solid, and it's going to spin in there, and it's going to wear, and all of a sudden you've got 2 balls in there, and you can't hold it tight.
Yeah. Well, I knew it had to do with suction and traction and.
Not just having contact around the edges, even when it wears, it still holds tight.
That's part of why there's a hole in the base of that anvil, and that's part of why you should put a hole in the base of your anvil stand, so the pressure goes to the outside and keeps it level and keeps it from moving, and keeps it from skating around the shop.
That's what lets you shoot an anvil.
Which I've never witnessed, and I can't wait to be invited to one of those picnics. Okay, so we've got, let me see, where these tongs will work. Thank you, sir. So I'm going to go in this way. Here's an issue. My piece of steel will not fit in there because that bottom die is bigger than my bottom die. So we can't do that. Well, at least I explained it to you, right? So, well, my steel won't fit in there. Yeah, that's too tall. Is that other? Wait a minute. I'm going to fix this. There's a smaller one over there. Aha. That'll work. I hope. We'll try. You just have to make really small butterflies if you don't have a big enough opening then.
That'll work.
It'll work now? Perfect. Barely. But I'm good. Guess what? I'm gonna make it work by if I give myself some clearance. Try and be even on both sides. Well, guess what? I did it wrong. I should have had it, I was trying to go kind of a 1/3, 2/3, but I should have had the shoulder on the other side. So, whatever, I messed that up. I'm just going to...
Butterfly fit the
I'm sure it does. Of course it does. So, if you don't have one of those anvil devils, which I don't because I sold them all and said I didn't need it anymore, your anvil has a, a triangle edge on it. So, no, I'm going to show you another way. If you don't have one of those and you don't have a hot cut, you still got a sharp edge someplace. I got her. So I'm going to find the sharpest edge I can on this guy, and here I got the same thing. Bending my knees, getting down. So improvise. Find what you have that will work the same way. Okay, so I don't need to continue to do all the smashing and fullering lines because it's the same exact thing, only you just change the direction your lines are going to. And then fold your little butterfly in half. Right here's your V block. If you don't have a swedge block, just come here. It's right there. And then with your straight peen or cross peen, give it a little fold, and then come back and use some tongs that'll hold it. And come back and soften your edges and give it some of this all the way around. So now you have several projects you can do out of the same tools and the same material and get all sorts of different results. Make belt buckles, keychains, whatever. So then, let's do the Quadrafoil.
What?
Want to do the Quadrafoil?
You want to start with that?
Yeah, we'll do that now. So let me tell you a little bit about the Quadrafoil. I built one. The very first blacksmithing class I took was with Scott Langton. He's a big hammer in the blacksmith industry, I guess. He's one of our Michigan guys. So he was teaching at Tillers International, which I had taken a class there. And it was right after I had gotten home I did a cultural exchange with the American Farriers Association to England. So I spent a month in England doing farrier work, and one of my hosts knew that I had an interest in blacksmithing, and his name is Les Armstrong, great friend and mentor. And so he took me around to various different places that had ironwork and showed me stuff. This was a panel in a church in Lichfield, England, the Lichfield Cathedral, and I really liked the look. I liked the design, and I had somebody who wanted me to build something that had a quatrefoil or a fleur-de-lure thing in it, and I thought, oh, there it is, and I needed to make this wall hanging. And so I thought, how am I going to do that? I mean, it looks so complicated. I know it's just a repeated pattern, but geez, it seems like a lot. So I took the photograph, I took it home, I put it on my computer, I converted it to, a PDF file or whatever where I could change it to a pencil drawing, and then I just colored the pencil drawing different colors. I was like, oh, this isn't all that bad. I just need 4 C scrolls and 4 outside scrolls and 4 little flamey things and 8 collars. It's not that bad. And it really is not that bad. Just build, and then it gave a really good opportunity to work on consistency. And so I built that with that class with Scott Langton, and then I did a presentation for Michigan and on that class, and so it talks about the quatrefoil and how the quatrefoil. I wrote it on the back, the definitions, because I'm a definition person of what exactly is a quatrefoil, and it's a 4-lobed thing, and the foil is actually the radius is in between, and the cusps are the spots where the radiuses come together. So it's the same radius of circle, and the cusps are where the circles intersect each other. So you can also have a trifoil or a bifoil or a unifoil or whatnot. So I built that quatrefoil, and this was different pieces, and then they were tack welded together and covered with a collar. And then I got into this traditional groove that I couldn't use that welder. I just wanted everything to be traditional. I didn't like cheating with the welder. And so when Scott called and asked me if I'd come out here, and I started panicking, which I always do. What am I going to build? What will I show them? And I sent Clay a message. I said, I don't know what to do, Clay. You're my mentor. I need you to guide me. And same thing, you know. I said, I got some smaller projects I could work on and talk about forging and basic techniques. But then I'd really like to do something that shows the influence that he's had on me. And then in turn, Francis, and in Francis's shop and everything. And he says, I wouldn't do anything new in front of a crowd of people. It doesn't work out well. And like I said, he didn't check with my mother because I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to forge a quatrefoil. So, and I'd never ever seen anyone demonstrate it. I've researched. I have all of Francis's books, so I looked through all of his books, trying to find all the information I can. And because a quatrefoil screams Francis Whitaker to me, I think of him, I think of quatrefoil. And so I decided I'm going to teach myself how to do this, and I'm going to do it in front of everybody, and hopefully I don't embarrass Clay. So my first 2 attempts were failures. I found a handout, and we actually made copies of this handout for all of you guys to give you after I'm done trying to show off. And I took this out to the shop and I started following the instructions and trying to recreate this quatrefoil. And my first 2 were fails. The first one I used, I think, 1/4 by 1/2 or something like that. And following the instructions, I created some weak spots and failure, and it broke apart before I could even bring it around into a quatrefoil. Scrap that. Try again. Grabbed a bigger piece of material. I thought I was just starting with too weak of material. So I grabbed the 3/8 square, and I was doing really good, and I was bringing it around for my final weld, and broke again. I was like, dang it, what am I doing wrong, you know? So go to the internet, go to the computer, go to YouTube. I cannot find any information anywhere, and I thought, that means it's a perfect demonstration. Nobody can find this information anywhere, so even if I do it wrong here today, you'll find out what doesn't work, and you can go home and maybe carry it forward, and you can do the demo next time. So the next thing I did was I was burning up steel like crazy, you know, because I'm starting with 40 inches, 3/8 square, and I'm looking at the steel rack, and I didn't want to waste time driving to town. So then I did a trifoil, and I thought, oh, I'm having some success. But there's things in this that I don't like, and in particularly this area right here where my weld starts to open up into the foil, and the cusps are opening up. And Francis talks about that in his handout, but I didn't know how to fix it. I just wasn't getting it. And I reached out to a man Clay introduced me to, Travis Fleming in Alabama, Athens Forge, and I was telling him what my issues were, and he was trying to guide me through messaging. I love that about messaging, that you can send pictures and stuff back and forth to each other. And so one of the key pieces is maintaining this when you go to bending your foils. And I'm going to do it the way James wants me to do it, since he's my new manager. And you haven't done anything wrong. So, okay, so we're going to start with 40 inches of 3/8 square, and with the tape. We've got a little tape here. I don't know how, if you were trying, I guess trial and error will get you a long ways and test pieces, but according to the instructions, you start with 40 inches to make, that's what that quatrefoil there on the table is 40 inches. So I'm going to make my first mark at 5 inches, and then every 10 inches after that. So that's 1/2 of a foil, and then there's 1, and then at 25 I've got 2, and at 35 I've got 3, and then my other half. So I have 4 foils. And then I'm going to use my anvil devil, which I sold to everybody. and mark my steel. So I'll just use my hot cut, same deal, and make a nick. Okay, so I have 4 nicks on it, and I'm going to start. The first process is going to be heat my first nick, fold it in half on itself, and forge weld.
You want to scarf the ends first, or?
Oh, yeah, scarfing. I don't scarf nothing. Everybody's got a different way of welding, and I don't scarf.
You want to start on this side?
Yeah, sure, it doesn't matter either end, they're the same. So, but the thing is like, you build one, and then you go to the next one in line, and you go along the bar, and that's the way, I don't know, I'll probably go home and try and do it a different way just to see if I can fail in a different way, start in the middle and work out. But the process is you got to fold each one, weld it, and then open it back up, because if you don't open it back up, and you leave it in some sort of a curved thing, at some point you can't fold the piece back on itself because the other end's in the way. And so originally, and there's a nice storyboard of Francis's over in the Porsche room on the wall, and there's different steps of the storyboard on the same pieces, but that doesn't indicate that you should do one on one end and then one on the other. It's just showing the different steps on the same piece of steel. So I had this one all done out in the straight, and it wouldn't fit in my suitcase, so I had to do 2 of the foils in order to make it fit in the suitcase. So what we'll do is I'll show you how to get them started, and then just so that I don't bore you, we'll just jump to this one that's already sort of halfway built. The things I don't like about this is, I should be forging these out so that they come to like $50 or something, a nice round disc, and because I was running out of time and panicking and all that trying to get here, I just went ahead and left it with this oblong shape, and then using just another Farrier tool, which this is called a bob punch, and it's for making these clips on horseshoes, and this, when you drive it and shear it down into the steel, creates a source, shearing your material to pull up for this clip. And I thought, well, that's not bad looking for a pedal shape, so I just make it kind of ferny or whatever. And then I'll go ahead and jump to this last piece here. Oh, we can do the ring too. I'll need to do that. And my intentions on this was that I was going to go ahead and rivet flowers onto these, and I think flowers belong on everything. And so go ahead and rivet those on there, and then this will be something that will not go home in my luggage, because I need to lighten up. So when I go home, I have less stuff. So leave as much here as I can. All right. I don't need tongs for this.
Ready?
I guess so. See where my marks are at. Right here. And should have been ready. Where's my hammer? Oh, thank you guys. So there's my mark. I'm hitting out here because if I hit here, inertia kicks this guy up, and I got to hit him anyways. So there's probably a million ways of bending a piece of steel, but get it coming around. And keep checking, just like Seth, you were doing this with your calipers, right? Watching your mark, and if you need to, pull in the material. So in Francis's instructions, he tells you to leave a spacer in there or whatever so that you can flux it and weld it. And so I'm not going to put anything in there, but there's a little daylight in there, and we'll go ahead and... Is this just borax in here?
Yeah, this is 20 mule team board.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. I'm just going to try and put the flux where I want the weld to assist me. Cover it all up. And as far as I understand about mule team or flux or whatever, is what you're doing is, if your material's clean, wire brush, cover it with the flux, that you create kind of like a jacket that protects the steel from oxidizing and building slag. If you build the slag on there and scale on there and try and weld, all you weld is the slag together, and then it pops apart and you don't get a weld. So that's my expertise on.
Jennifer,
Yeah.
you gotta do like Dorothy with the flux here.
Spray it. Then welding is really all about the fire, and if I've got a big piece, I'll rotate it inside the fire and try and gradually, I think Seth talked about that, or somebody did talk about gradually bringing the heat up and making a deep soak all the way through the material. And then when I come out, if the first thing you do is wallop it, all you do is splatter all your liquid steel all over the place. And so just little taps really for me, tap, 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 tap. And then the anvil will be stealing heat out of your material. So I rotate it back and forth so that I don't have one side cooling off. Once you start seeing those little sparks and stuff coming up out of the fire, and you see the steel disappear and the colors all start to run together, you see it start to get glassy and molten, you know you're pretty well. Are you using that as a rest, or is this in the way for you?
No, it's all right.
You want it there?
That's okay.
Okay.
Just about ready.
It's just about ready. I'm going to use it right inside my hammer. I was building mine in the propane forge at home, and I kept thinking, oh, when I get to the coal, the weld will be so much easier and it won't open up and split on me, so we'll see what happens. Thank you, sir. It doesn't look like a great weld to me. So, because I don't feel great about it, we're just going to do it again. And I can see, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but I can see a seam in here, and I really don't want to see it there and there. So with my hammer blows, I'm trying to push the steel back and forth as if I was smudging that away like that. And then, what do we do with that spring fuller we were going to use?
I had it here. Where the heck? On the forge. On the forge. Here.
On the forge. If it was a snake, it would have been a snake spring fuller. So in Francis's instructions, he instructs to fuller down right behind your weld, and maybe you're also welding with this, both sides, and just necking it down a little bit. When I was doing this at home, that's where I was creating my weak spot that was breaking. So I quit doing it, and I thought, what? That's my failure spot. I'm going to take that out. So we're going to do it this way because James wants me to, and see how it works out. And it's got to stop here so that each time you stick your cusp in there, you go to the same spot.
Do you do much forge welding in your forge shoeing profession? If so, what applications?
Yeah, creating bar shoes for a horse, which I didn't bring a bar shoe. I know Tom had one around, but a bar shoe is somewhat of a, hold that.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna try it. I don't know whether I should turn it or not, but I'm gonna. So hopefully my weld's good and that helps. Then we go to smashing. And I can see my weld opening up on me, which I'm not happy about. So I would go ahead and continue to forge weld that a little bit. The other thing that crossed my mind when I was doing this at home is it's easy to weld two pieces together in this orientation, one on top of another. It's hard to weld one that's side by side this way. And so I wondered, why couldn't I lock this guy in the vise, put my twisty wrench on there, and twist that so that then I was welding sandwich style. And you've done that in the past? Yes.
What happened?
It's opening up on me again. So
Yeah.
should I put a little flux on there? Just we might as well. If we're going back into the fire and I have a questionable weld, there's no reason to not go back up to weld and do a little bit more, and then I'm going to take and open that guy up. Thank you, Clay. Oh, made my day. So then the trick to maintain that cusp when I go to open up the foils is to pin it together. So you could use a turning fork, which, you know, there's all these various turning forks of Francis's, different widths, radiuses around the insides of them, clamp into the vise. And like I said, I don't enjoy making tools, and most of my stuff is just cobbled together enough that I can get something done. And so I created, from an idea somebody shared with me, angle iron with a round stock plug welded in there, and I have adjustable turning forks. Thank you, sir. So I'm supposed to forge that down to a $50 size or whatever. I mean, it depends on what you're going to do, and my intentions are I'm going to rivet something to it, so I'm all right with that. Come to my turning fork. Am I in the bad way or a good way? It don't matter. And open her up. Anytime I can, I blow off that anvil. So you can see the weld opening up. So obviously, after I do about 100 of these, if I can't overcome that, I have got to figure out what the heck I'm doing wrong. But I definitely need more practice at it. I was using my hardy hole as a place to hide my foil and maybe kind of, but try and maintain the consistency you want there, because you're going to have a really hard time ever getting back into that spot. So then the process is to heat the next section, fold it on itself, and continue until you have all 4 of them done. So then you'll start to turn them into your foils. Let's see, it goes this way. Okie dokie. So we'll jump in and we'll do this one, and then we'll forge weld this one together. We'll go ahead and heat up this section next. And we'll just abandon this piece.
This section?
Yeah, and we'll go to this now. So that's how you get started. And then the next part after that is going to be to figure out the ring. I didn't want to cheat on this one. The ring is fit around the quatrefoil by tension and fit. It's not tack welded and cheated in there. So in order to figure out the circumference of a circle, you measure the diameter and multiply it by pi, which is 3.14. And it always comes up with some number that is a decimal, and there's no decimals on my ruler, so I guess from there on out. And the first ring I made to fit this piece, I forgot that you have to add the thickness of the material you will be wrapping around, so that you're actually going from the center line of the stock to the center line of the sock is actually the circumference that you're after. And this one actually worked out to be 30.824 or something like that, or maybe it was 31 point something. And I said, I'm gonna try and get as accurate to the size as I want, but I would rather stretch the circle than shrink it. How do you shrink a circle? And I didn't want the quatrefoil to be sloppy in there. I wanted it to fit tight. So I guessed at my 31. I went ahead and bent it into a circle and overlapped my ends, and I laid it up on my quatrefoil, and I found out I was a little bit too long, so then I went ahead and got the hacksaw and whacked off a little chunk. So there's a lot of different ways of doing this as well. Let's see if I can get some of this. Yeah. Lots of ways to bend stuff. If you want to use bending forks or a jig or fixture or whatever you call it. Being the farrier, I want to go to the horn, and I want to do it here. So I'm starting, on top. This is nothing different than doing a horseshoe to me, and all of that slag has a magnetic ability to jump onto my arm because I'm down here. I try and keep my hand above the face of the anvil when all possible, but if I can't, knock the slag off. Now I can't hold on to that way. So one thing Clay was instructing me, because I take advantage of being a demonstrator to also stand in front of you and humiliate myself by telling you everything I don't know, but it also gives me the opportunity for all of you to know what I don't know, and you can tell me then. So I have a tremendous amount of learning here as well. And Clay was saying it helps to draw a circle with a cross along here so that you can continually check to see where you're coming. I was doing that circle in my eye, or in my head, just trying to bring this quadrifoil along. And I'm looking at this cusp, wanting it to point to that cusp, and tightening it up. But you certainly could go to a turning fork with a turning wrench and do the exact same thing. So I'm dialed in sort of close. I'm going to go ahead and bring these two together, forge weld them together, and then I'll adjust and try and make each radius the same shape. So I'm going to take some heat on here and try and bring these guys together and forge weld them. So a question was asked earlier about using the horn, and James said, oh, well, when you do your circle, we'll run over to the cone. And I said, oh, yeah, that works good. I got a cone in my shop. His name's Stanley. But this is a cone to me. If you take this surface here where I work, the top part where your hammer is, the straightening side and the bending side, that is a cone. If I had the rest of it all that same shape replicated around, it's a cone. if I take a piece of bale wire or solder wire or whatever you want, and I start here, whatever, and wrap that all the way around there and cut, I will have each continual arc graduating bigger and bigger. And then if I do the same thing and I do it on a diagonal, I'll get the next sequence of radiuses bigger and bigger. So everything in here is a cone to me, all to very large sizes. And when I'm doing like my coffee tables, or not the coffee tables that are, 40 inches across or anything, but the little end tables that are 24 inches, if I work on a diagonal and in the same spot rotating my material around, it's no different than working on that cone. So you have cones. You don't have to, you don't have one, you do. Pretty close. That's not too bad. Looks like it's a long ways away, but this still needs to come in quite a bit, and I need to put some radius on that. So we'll just take another little heat on this side. We'll get that rounded up.
This one or this one?
Yeah, this one
This
here.
one.
The cold one.
The cold.
Thank you, James. So whenever I just did a workshop, clay is a huge inspiration to me. I just absolutely loved the table class, and I took the table class because I had a project to build a gate, and I had no idea how to build a gate, and the table looked like a gate with legs. So it was a traditional joinery class. I was building a gate for a house on Mackinac Island. It's a mansion to me, it's a cottage to them, and it was built in the late 1800s, so I wanted to be period correct. And so Clay presents his students with basically a how-to instructional before the class, and I took advantage of that, and I read through the whole thing, and I went out to the shop and I started practicing things and trying to figure out as many ways not to do it as possible, so that when I got with Clay I could only just focus on things that weren't going to be mistakes, and got all the errors I could out of the way at home. So I followed Clay's lead, and I created an instructional manual for my workshop as well. This is one I did in June, and they saw the tables I brought to Abana. One was the table Clay taught me to build, one the miniature, and then you'll see pictures of these in the slideshow, that I built some coffee tables, one coffee table, and decided it was for a commission, they wanted a coffee table, but end tables, or coffee tables, a kitchen table. I built a kitchen table, and the kitchen table is not as marketable as a coffee table. Everybody can use a coffee table. So that's when I shortened the legs and started doing the coffee tables. Took one with me. I took one to the competition that Clay spoke about. I'll talk about that. And then when they asked me to come and do this end table workshop, I started laying out Clay's design and everything. I thought, wait a minute, this is Clay's work. I need to take the inspiration Clay gave me and carry it on. And so I came up with my own design, which was sort of a combination of the end tables and Clay's table. Okay, so I need to close this guy up, and I'm not afraid to do it cold a little bit here. I need to get this side closed up just a little bit more. So I'm going to need a little bit of heat in here so that I can just ease this around to come in. The going around a radius will take more steel than a straight piece. So if I'm measuring a horseshoe that has a real round circumference to it, there we go. Thank you, Clay. It will take a lot more steel to go around this round, rather than if the horse had very straight walls and a more square shape to his foot. The round will take more material than the straight lines. And whenever you bend something on round, you stretch the outside and you pucker or upset the inside. So that's something to think about when you're forging, because your steel dimensions are going to change a little bit. Okay, so then while he's warming that up, the way to make, this is 31 inches based off of, hopefully it will come out the same as that. And if you don't have a wheel roller at home, you are a wheel roller. And with your turning forks, I would go ahead along and mark every 1 inch on that bar, just as guidelines for myself. Okay, and then here's what Clay's explaining, using a circle and a cross grid to get your quatrefoils lined up. And I need this guy to overlap that guy a bit. Okay, so I've got them overlapped with the piece on top near me, because when I come to weld and I don't scarf, I weld it and then the scarf occurs as I'm welding. I'm going to drop my hammer, first weld, and then I'm going to start pushing this way, and then I'll start pushing this way. And it's just easier for me to push the material than it is for me to pull the material. So we'll get a little light heat here on our, where we're going to weld, wire brush it, flux it, go into the fire. So using the 3/8 by 3/8 square, I can do it sandwich style, just like the cusps, and smash it together that way. But if I was using like 1/4 by 1/2, then you can't line up that on a sandwich, and you got to do it the spoon way. And in order to do that, Francis had a jig that, yeah, here it is. So he created just a portion of the horn that would fit inside the anvil, and he can hang the foil on it and do his welding without this interfering with anything here. And it would be the side-by-side way, where when I'm doing sandwich way, I can weld it this way, is an advantage of using the square stock versus a flat bar.
That tool is mostly used for flat stock.
Yeah,
Mostly used for flat stock.
yep. He doesn't have his hearing aid turned up because he just repeated what I said to make sure I didn't forget. I need to get some flux in there too. Yeah, perfect. So when I was doing this in the propane forge at home, I wasn't thinking real good, and I kept grabbing the high side, and the low side would sag. And when I would come out, I wasn't getting my weld to stick. So when I figured that out, I need to hold the low side so that the high side is supported. Does that make sense? Okay, I'll take a weld on that. Oops, sorry. So then, okay, go along, mark 1 inch with your chalk or whatever, or just eyeball it, and get yourself pinned in your turning forks. And then I just do a repeating motion over and over again, going at my 1 inch mark. And what's going to happen is I'm going to run out of leverage on this side. So at some point, I'm going to turn it around and do the same thing again. You can do it hot, you can do it cold, it doesn't matter. So I need more, obviously.
Did you flex this?
I did. You holler at me when you're ready. I'm not getting it very round, but I don't really, I mean, it's nice to get it pretty darn close, but I'm going to true it up on the horn, and I want to be able to show you that too. What would Francis say?
Have a full-size drawing and bend the curve to it.
Yeah. Please, if you have something that Francis would say, share it with me, because, I mean, I didn't get the opportunity to be directly influenced by him, so I rely on you guys. So, getting that kind of close. I want it to overlap, though. When I do the big coffee tables or kitchen table or something, I seriously just go to the fab shop near me and have them roll it through their big roller, and then I MIG weld it together. The part about being, I guess, a professional blacksmith or trying to make an income by it is, a lot of times all I can do is work off of the budget, and the budget's never what I want it to be. So you start figuring out ways that you can cheat, and to make I learned how to make a round inside corner on the table legs. With Clay's table, we would have a square outside corner, but a round inside corner, and then the leg would come down to its foot and whatnot. And in order to create that, I did it the hardest way possible to challenge myself and to try and impress Clay. It didn't weld. Yeah.
Now you're halfway scarred.
Yeah, that's true. And that's part of the reason why I don't scarf, because if I scarf and then I fail, next thing you know, I don't have enough material, and I got a big pit and a hollow spot and a long spot, and it's nothing near what I wanted. So maybe that's part of the reason why I don't scarf. But there's a world-renowned farrier by the name of Bob Marshall who taught me how to weld without scarfing, and I was struggling with the scarfing, so part of the other reason I do it. Okay, we'll try again. All right, we're gonna try again. I didn't make it. We're running out of coal, and
Tell you what, I gotta clean the fire.
yeah, that's part of it too. Yeah, dirty fire. So
We just gonna have to do something else.
that's okay. Let's see. What else can we do? Well, it's pretty darn close to lunchtime, right? Am I supposed to? 20 minutes. Okay. I'm going to let him clean the fire, and I will talk about, Black Bear Forge. I think he did a video on feathers. Feathers was something I wanted to learn how to do. See somebody's wearing one on their, Scott's got one on his lariat. Yeah, I just love that little feather thing, and I wanted to try feather. So while I was doing the dogwoods for Virginia, I thought I'm going to go ahead and, they wanted to see the portions of the lamps that I demonstrate parts of the lamps, and part of the lamps was a lot of angle iron work, and so I was trying to show them different things you could do with angle iron, and that's how I understand you make a feather. So while I was doing the dogwoods, I also started playing around with a little bit of angle iron and made a little feather. And then I went over to Robert's machine shop and I was showing him my dogwoods, looking for, what do you think? Does it look like a dogwood? What do you? And then I showed him this and I said, well, what do you think about that? And he says, well, I've never quite seen a leaf like that. So the blacksmith test, show somebody what you built and see if they can identify it. And I was like, damn, it's not what I wanted. So be careful you don't show a feather when you're showing flowers because it looks like a leaf. So I tried again, and I went to the research, Google, and started looking at feathers and realized there's all sorts of different feathers, whether it's a wing feather or a tail feather or whatever part of the bird it's on, it's got a different shape to it. And so I still don't think this looks like a feather. I think it's better than that one, but I really like Scott's is fantastic. But it's a piece of angle iron, flattened out. I think when Black Bear Forge does his, he shows putting it in a half round swedge block and forging the backside so you don't have that wrinkle in the back of it. And then just a lot of chisel work, which this goes really well underneath the treadle hammer. And I textured it first, and the one thing I neglected to do in this was to let some of it split through, so it has that where the feathers come apart at. This is sort of my little secret project. I'm trying to get my name associated with this like I have the bridge, that whenever anyone sees this style of a vessel, that, oh, that's a Jennifer Horn vessel. And I brought this one with me. It's full of my business cards, and I encourage you to take one. I do Facebook. I am on Instagram. I don't do a lot of posting on there. I just don't have time for all this stuff. Okay, if you go to my personal Jennifer Horn, it's Jennifer Horn, most common name you can come up with. So my maiden name is DiPolo, and it's written on my card here somewhere, Jennifer DiPolo Horn on Facebook. And if you let me know that, you know, if I don't remember your face from here or your name from here, or you have a dog as your profile picture and I don't know it's you, then send me a message and say, hey, we just met, and I'll friend you. I do not friend everybody under the sun. So if you don't want to be friends personally with me, then just go to Daisy Hill Forge, and it's a public page, and there are no bridge pictures on that page. So, and I can tell you about this whole vessel evolution, because it started off with square treasure chest things that I built, and there's a series of those in the project slideshow. This was a portion of Clay's occasional table. So this is jump welded here. It's what the end of this is. It's one piece folded in half, welded at the end, and then jump welded onto this parent stock, which the other end would receive one as well, and a cross piece, so that the table had this sort of a thing going on it. And I just really liked the design, but I didn't want to repeat Clay's table. I wanted to take the lessons he taught me and create my own design, and so I came up with this one here, which is the same thing as that Quadrafoil. It's just a repeating pattern over and over again, and it has the slit drift pass-throughs, and if you guys want to see me do that, we can demo it on my next little short demo daily. And then in order to teach the workshop in Minnesota in June, they said, well, can you build that? No, this I don't even know how many hours are into this, but this table is for sale. This exact table is in my living room, and I'd like to sell it. I took it to Abana to show it off. It's the first one I built. I took to a contest in New Mexico. It was the most versatile blacksmith competition. It was all farriers, but doing blacksmith work, and it had to be period correct for John Wayne's rawhide. And there were 3 different classes, one where you brought a project from home, one that you built on site traditionally, and one where you were allowed to have mechanical tools. or modern technology. And so I built the coffee table at home, and I learned so many lessons and figured out so many mistakes that I wanted to build it again to be able to correct my mistakes. And I made a poster that shows the two different tables side by side. Should I put it down here? And you can see huge differences, right, in the tables. And the one on the right is the first table that I took to the contest. And I did win first place with it, and I was super excited about that. I beat a world champion, Mark Milster, the one and only time I will probably ever beat Mark Milster, but really proud to have done that day. He brought a queen-size bed, and I beat him. So I was really after that belt buckle that said most versatile blacksmith. I really wanted that. And Mark took it home. But so this was the second table that I made. And the things that I wanted to improve on it was, if you can see all the irregularities on these inside, I call them petals. This is a floral pattern to me. And I didn't like how inconsistent it was. And the inconsistencies came because I was having issues getting my slit drifts pass-throughs to work out. And I was filing them, and I'm stretching material and whatever, trying to make it come together. And I'm running out of time because I had to drive this down to Amarillo, Texas, to get it delivered to a friend who would take it to New Mexico later in the year, and whatever. There's logistics involved. And so when I repeated it, one of the important things was I was trying to get this more symmetrical, and all of the little curls more symmetrical. And then this was a piece of angle iron that I just stuck all the ends of all those scrolls into and collapsed onto it. And on the second one, I put that flower in the center and just covered basically riveted that flower to cover everything up in the center there. So then the second part of that story is the class that Clay taught, was the little miniature treasure chest, coffer, and it's a little 3x5 chest, and I absolutely love it. It's just amazing. And I had built a couple of treasure chests that were bigger, and I had challenges with them. And then, so when I was able to get to one of his classes, I thought, I'm going to figure out how to do this without I've got to figure out how to do this easier. And so it was a week-long class. It's very tedious, a lot of small work. Clay does a lot of demonstrations through his classes, which are fantastic to help you along through the process. But it took a week of all day. I mean, we would stay in the shop after dinner and everything and work on it as long as we needed to. And by the end, I think everyone went home with a finished piece. And one thing Clay does that I think is fantastic is he figures out a lot of the difficult parts and comes up with these fancy tools that assist you through that. And again, I'm not the tool maker. So each night, me and Bob and Kyle, we'd go back to, he didn't know this, but we'd go back to our campground and we'd think about, what did we do today and how can we make that easier and simpler and faster? And so I took the things that he was doing. First of all, small is hard. So it's the first thing we got to do is make it bigger so it's not so hard. And so I made a 5x7 treasure chest, and I built some of the tooling that I had saw Clay, and I took my fiance and his daughter, because now I had 150 pounds worth of luggage that I could pack. And at the end of the class, I told Clay, I said, I'm going to a contest in 3 days, and I'm going to build this at the contest. And he laughed at me, of course. And he said, well,
Make a 5-day project in 1 day?
let me know how you do, he said. And so I built it. I had some pieces already. I was allowed to come with prepared material. So we start with an outline box shape on the bottom, and I had already had that pre-cut. And we used angle iron. I had made my own angle iron there. It gave me some advantages as far as punching holes, and because this was not my traditional piece. We actually used I used electric tools on this for drilling some holes in the box, whatnot. Anyways, so And I was allowed to have an assistant. So my fiance was my assistant. He's a machinist and very in tune, and like we think a lot of the same. And he assisted me, and we put in 12 hours all day, both of us. And we finished that little, I called it a stagecoach safe, so it was period correct. And at the end, I ended up losing to Mark Milster, the hometown favorite, and he built the most beautiful hammer, you know, and he makes absolutely beautiful. It's nothing but a rounding hammer. It's nothing but this. It's not like it's chiseled and filed and detailed and engraved or nothing like that. It's just a hammer. And Mark beat me in that class, and so that allowed him to take home the belt buckle. But I had a great time, and it was a ton of fun. And the stagecoach safe sold for, I don't know, it was pretty cheap, like $600. You know. And the table too. It sold through an auction there, and it sold for like $700, which disappointing that you couldn't. But luckily, I got 70% of that. That was the first time I'd ever been at a competition where I got some of the money back out of the pieces. There's a picture of the stagecoach safe in the slideshow too. So, okay, I'm going to watch the weld this time. He might bring his steel to a little. What do you want? Flux. And here I thought welding in the coal was going to be easier for me than welding in the propane. Are there any questions? No? You guys all got serious on me. You're getting hungry, right? Let's see, what else can I talk about? I will be teaching a class at the New England School of Metalwork in October. It's beginner, advanced beginner, sort of just small projects that help solidify all the basic techniques. And I know it's a long ways away, but maybe somebody would like to come. What's that? Good. Yeah, in October, like what better time to go to up there? I'm sorry? The leaf peepers. Yeah, leaf peepers. So the flowers, I guess, here's something I can kind of show you. This was sort of my first trial at trying to get the columbine to come together. So I was trying to get that little funnel thing down near the center. And then when I realized I wasn't going to get that deal off the back, I vacated it, and it went in the Franken pile, which I keep a pile of stuff that is rejects from everywhere else, and then eventually that stuff comes back out, and it comes into a Franken project. And so the columbine has all those, whatever they're called, stamens. And so I was like, oh, how do you make those stamens on there? Like, what are you going to do that? And so I was trying to use the MIG welder and like squirt out and get, and try and make those stamens. And it was failing miserably. So back to that hoarding problem I have. It's not a hoarding problem. It's a resource. Nobody wants a coffee can full of mixed up nuts and nails and stuff like that. So I gather them from all over the place. And I have that OCD that sorts all that stuff out. And so here I had these little piles of finish nails on the bench that I had sorted out, and I took them and I stuck them into whatever, a hole, whether it's in a piece of steel or a nut or a washer or whatever, stuck them in a hole, welded the ends together, and then drilled a hole through my piece and plug welded it in there and plug welded it to another piece. and then you really don't have to put any effort into that. Like when you get it hot and try and start wire brushing it, that stuff just, you gotta be more careful to keep it together. But just thought I'd share another one of those ideas. So, I'm sorry? 5 minutes, okay. So this went, time disappeared a little bit better than I had thought. I thought I was gonna have too much time. When we come back at my next session, I'll go ahead and forge weld the ring, show you how to true up the ring on the horn, and then demonstrate how to wrap. I like the wrap. I try and concentrate that I have 1, 2, 3, my odd number thing going on, and then I'm going to go ahead and rivet some of these plasma cut. I do occasionally use some plasma cut stuff. My son introduced me to water jetting, which is phenomenal, and now he's switched jobs and I lost my water jet. So really, I'm really disappointed in him. But I'm going to go ahead and rivet these plasma cut pre-textured. I did this at home, but I'll rivet those together and finish this off and leave it for your auction then. So. Perfect. It's not welding. Okay, we got another failure. So, wait for it. Okay, so now you know how to not weld in front of people anyways, and I'll try and salvage it and clean it up and lighten my suitcase. I'm not taking any of this home with me. And yeah, forge welding takes some practice, and I know that me personally watching the fire and knowing when is ready for me might have been part of the change in my program. But I got excellent fireman there, so it's probably my fault. But thank you guys. We'll go have lunch.